Hi, this is Rick Savitsky from Chortek. In this video, I'm going to talk about a best practice for manufacturers, how you can use your backlog to predict future gross profit, and specifically how we can use analytics to help overcome a challenge with accomplishing that. But first, why bother? Well, it can be very, very helpful to predict your future gross profit and then compare the results compared to what you actually performed and work on a continuous improvement. It can be very, very helpful not just to focus on the top line, how much revenue are you expecting to generate and ship out the door in the future, but what might your margin be? In this case, those different colored bars represent potential gross profit. Anyone in manufacturing knows that costing can be tricky. Which cost do you use? Do you use the last cost? If you're going to use an average, over what time period do you use? What about parts that haven't been run before? Do you want to take a pessimistic worst case scenario? What was our maximum cost for a part? And again, over what time period are you looking back? These are all reasons that it can be a little tricky to actually accomplish the objective. But again, why bother doing it is that you can predict where it might land and then work on maximizing the gross profit. Okay, so how do you do this though if your ERP system doesn't give you a nice clean report or a dashboard that shows you not just your backlog, but again these future expected values by future date, but then also different cost assumptions, and again, which cost are you going to use? Well, I think the solution here I'm going to show you is how you can use Power BI to leverage your existing data and do those calculations in a very interactive way. So main premise is we're going to use Power BI to pull both the backlog information from the ERP as well as your historical runs for the job or part and what those costs have been in the past. And we're going to make it easy for a sophisticated team member to actually see the detail on one page and be able to validate and then agree on, hey, well, how do we best summarize this? What are we going to assume as our methodology for which costing methods to use? And then share that information with the team. So that's what we're going to do in Power BI. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll admit there's a lot of information here on purpose. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through it and give you a little run through. So to begin, we're looking at our total backlog value broken down by customer and a count of how many jobs or different parts are expected to be run. I've got another grid that is summarizing in some color coding here. In blue is our last cost, in kind of pink is our average cost, and in yellow our max cost for a given time period. So we've got a graph as well that's kind of making this distinction. If I click on a particular customer, I'm now looking at just those parts that were, again, already booked. It's in our backlog, but we haven't run them. But I'm able to see how many times have I run those parts and what the costs have been and our gross profit percentages over time. Key thing here is we're seeing they're not all identical. If I further click on a particular part, I'm able to drill down and see every time we've run that part and summarized information, total revenue, cost, gross profit percentage. Again, the point here is they're not all the same. This isn't super consistent. So we can agree as a team, all right, which methodology we're going to use. Are we going to take a composite between last and average cost? Or just use average? Are we going to change the time period that we're using, trailing 12 months, 2 years worth, just the last 6 months? Those are all decisions that can be made, and then ultimately getting us to a useful calculation, total revenue, and then kind of an agreed upon what do we think our gross profit is actually going to be. And again, we can do that period by period into the future. Finally, let me show you one other little piece here. What do we do if we just want to see, hey, for this particular customer, in our backlog, parts that we've never run before? Now we could just query from the estimate and get the expected gross profit. In this case, it's showing example of using analytics to take the average gross profit for that customer for a date range and say, let's just use that as the assumed gross profit, and then see how we do comparatively when we run it for actuals. So a lot of information. I think I'm making the point though, if you give your team members this level of detail, and this is always being updated and up to date, you can start managing by exception. And what do I mean by that? Again, why are we doing this? Well, if we can predict what our gross profit should be for the next month and the month thereafter and so on based on the backlog, we certainly then can compare that with what actually happens. And we're going to want to get a great process in place so that your team can deal with the outside, the exceptions, the outliers, cost variances that are greater than a certain percentage, and then work, brainstorm, and figure out, hey, do you need to requote it? Did it not run as expected? Do you need to change something in your routing process, material difference? List goes on and on. But the point is, can you put your focus on those where you're not hitting your expectation, so that as you keep moving forward in the future, you're always increasing, ideally, your gross profit percentage, part by part, job by job, which then all lands to the bottom line and helps the company be more profitable and more competitive. It's really helpful also for the finance team to be able to calculate not just total expected revenue, but how much is going to be left over to cover all the other bills. So if this is helpful, please give the video a like. Please share it with someone else you think might benefit. Give us a ring or fill out our web request form. We'd love to hear from you. Love to work with you. We love helping manufacturers be as efficient and profitable as possible using modern data analytics. Thanks a lot. Bye.